Hi all, this is your Professor Ian. Welcome to week 11 of English 1B. So this is my usual Monday video. I'll talk about what we did last week, tie it to what we're doing this week, just make any announcements. So last week we looked at 3 texts about the state of conspiracy theories and fake news in America today. We started with that one called On Russian Influence. The author who studies these things using really getting into the math of it, breaking down how many memes are out there, tracing it back to the IRA, that government, or well, not government, but that Russian agency, government agency, but not officially. Anyways, she's looking at the 2018 midterm elections, and she has a lot of hard data to back up her claims. So it's really interesting to look at those numbers and just see the sheer number of memes and what they're trying to do, and just look at it with those hard numbers involved. A lot of questions came up in the perusal. A lot of people were asking, like, why? What are these people? What are the Russians trying to accomplish here? And there's a number of theories there. There are theories that the Russians prefer certain candidates, right? That they preferred Trump, and they were trying to engineer things so that more people came out to vote for Trump. That's part of what they were probably trying to do. But probably a larger part of what they're trying to do is just sow discord and make the election process chaotic for Americans. And part of that, you might ask, well, why would they bother? I think part of that is that when America is involved with strife at home, they aren't as involved with foreign policy around the world. And Russia is involved with a lot of different countries, right? There's that whole thing that happened in Crimea. They're involved in Syria. They're in many places in the world trying to influence how things are going, just like every country does. But in this big geopolitical, matchup that goes on between Russia and America and other countries, but between Russia and America, I think some Russian politicians think that if they can distract American politicians and the American public, then they can do things that they want in a geopolitical way. It's to their advantage to have America in a kind of chaotic situation where they're not fully engaged with foreign policy. That's a big part of what they're trying to accomplish, and other state players are trying to accomplish as well. Sowing discord is a big part of this. So that's part of why they're doing. There's a lot of theories about why they're doing it. Nobody fully knows, right? It's not like Putin came out and says, this is what we're doing. But those are some of the ideas. Some people were asking, do these memes actually really affect people? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, we can say, I think with a lot of truth, that when I see an individual meme online, I don't think, oh, I'm convinced by that. But when I see a meme 30,000 times, it starts to seep in, right? This is how advertising works. This is how marketing works. And there's some people who are paying less attention and are more affected by memes. So the people who are doing this manipulation are banking on people not really paying attention and on just getting the message out there. And even if they can just cause outrage and get people talking about it a little bit, that's success, as we see in some of the later articles we read last week. And then another big question that came up is, what should social media companies do? Because a lot of people were like, well, why don't we shut this down? Why do we allow this? And the problem is that social media companies are in this kind of bind where they don't want to be publishers, where they control the information and decide what's truth and what's not, because that makes them liable for everything that's posted on their sites. The reason that Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all these social media sites have been able to operate without liability is because they're not technically publishers. They're just hosting sites. You can put whatever you want on there. As soon as Facebook decides, okay, we're going to really start deciding what's truth and what's not, suddenly that takes them into this position that they're a publishing company. They're publishing content online, and therefore they're more liable for that content. So this is something they've struggled with since the beginning. Where is this line, right? And we see this happening right now with the whole Hunter Biden laptop thing, right? So Twitter, the different companies had different reactions to this story, and it really shows different approaches and the debate that goes on behind closed doors at these companies. Like, what is our role in arbitrating the truth of these situations, right? And there's a lot at stake for these companies too. So it might seem like, oh, why don't they just shut it down? But again, this is part and parcel of the very makeup of these social media companies, is they don't want to get too involved, right? So it's a really interesting question about what should be done. So that was that first article. The second one, I give you a video to watch, that great PBS Frontline report mostly on Alex Jones. So if you didn't know who Alex Jones was before, now you do, and I guess I'm sorry for that, because most people don't take him seriously because he is very bombastic. He doesn't seem very tethered to the truth. He doesn't really support any of his claims with solid journalism or research or anything like that. He's very much an emotionally driven guy, and there are theories about what he's trying to accomplish. There's an excellent segment on or episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver devoted to Alex Jones, and basically he accuses him of just trying to profit off of this media empire that he's built, because he does have a whole store where he sells things and he sells advertising. So Alex Jones is making a lot of money, so there's a profit motive, but it could be he's also a true believer in some of these causes. But anyways, he as you see in the video, he was not taken seriously for most of his career, and then recently he's really been able to peddle his infamy into greater infamy, I guess. But there are people like Roger Stone and Donald Trump who are courting his audience. Donald Trump appeared on his show at one point, I think right after he became the president-elect, and promised Alex Jones's audience that he'd look after them or look out for them or whatever. So this legitimizes someone like Alex Jones, and suddenly his conspiracy theories gain more legitimacy, and so on and so forth. It's kind of a vicious cycle. And now he's in the news. He's a public figure nowadays, whereas before he was just kind of, as they talk about in the video, just kind of like public access weirdo, right? You'd see late at night. The video also does a really good job of explaining how this is also part of how conspiracy theories have been used as a political tool. Even if most people don't believe in a specific theory, it gets people talking, it diverts interest. Another interesting thing that happens here is that people devalue the news. And I could see this in the perusal comments. A lot of people were making comments about how the media is evil and you can't trust anything, et cetera, et cetera. And you should really think about your ideas there, because it's people like Alex Jones and other people who use conspiracy theories as political tools that are undermining our faith in journalistic ethics and journalistic standards. You shouldn't completely write off media, because media is this giant category of things, right? You shouldn't just write off all journalism as being corrupt and not trustworthy because of people like Alex Jones who are poisoning the well, right? We need to think about sources and how we can find good stuff online, because that is our main source of information. So you can't just write it off and say it's all fake. You need to say, okay, how do we find good stuff? One key is to find a good source, right? I listen to NPR all the time. NPR has good reporters that have journalistic ethics and they take things seriously. When they do a story on Facebook, they divulge before the story, hey, Facebook is one of our sponsors, we're doing this story anyways, right? So things like that tell me, okay, these people have some journalistic ethics and so on and so forth. But anyways, it's up to us to find good sources, and Alex Jones isn't one of them. But anyways, we also looked at an article on Pizzagate, which I think really helps us see how conspiracy theories do become political tools, because it's hard to imagine that a lot of people would take Alex Jones seriously and then be motivated to do things. But you can see how Alex Jones is part of a larger web of information about conspiracy theories. Something ridiculous like the Pizzagate thing becomes more believable when you hear 30,000 people talking about it, even if we know that most of them are bots, right? On Twitter, suddenly just the sheer number of people talking about something, you think to yourself, well, hey, is there truth in this? And as we saw the other week, if this conspiracy theory speaks to something you already believe, like if you don't trust politicians, you think all famous people are prone to sexual crimes, you really don't like the Democrats, right? All these things are true of you, and then you hear this conspiracy theory, and then you hear 30,000 people talking about it on Twitter, and then you see Alex Jones getting really emotional about it. Suddenly this starts to have an effect on some people, on more people than one would imagine. But anyways, that article is a great demonstration of journalism as well. Like that was a journalistic piece that was published in the Rolling Stone, and it just shows you the power of journalism, right? So we shouldn't be too cynical about journalism, because there is really good work that can be done by tracing the truth through this like web of things, right? It just takes ethics and it takes work. And for us as consumers, it also takes work and it takes ethics. We shouldn't just believe what we want to believe. We should pause and think, is that true? And I put an article on this week called Informational Distancing, and it's all about that idea of like stepping back and saying, wait a minute, this appeals to something I believe. Am I going to buy this too soon? That whole confirmation bias thing. So just a good one to read. Also last week on the Flipgrid, everybody's looking at those fake news articles on Wired, and like 90% of everybody chose one of the articles about TikTok, which I thought was interesting. I guess you're a bunch of TikTok fans, but really good stuff there too as well. And then there was a discussion forum last week about grammar, style, and rhetoric. Everybody had some really good things to say, and it's really important to really get into the nitty-gritty of like style when you're doing rhetorical analysis, and to make those connections. Like if you see a lot of adverbs and adjectives in something, probably the author's going for more of a narrative kind of feel, right? Telling a story, trying to paint a picture, and you want to think about why they're taking that approach rather than say a more clinical approach, right? If we're being more clinical and more objective, we tend to use fewer adjectives and adverbs, and we use just like descriptive language, right? The man with the white coat ran quickly into the room, right? That's a very narrative kind of feel. That's got adjectives, it's got adverbs, right? Whereas, the man ran into the room, just describing it, uses fewer adjectives and adverbs and has a plainer feel to it, a more descriptive feel. Not that the first one is inaccurate, but it has more, it's more trying to paint a picture. And you want to think about why that is, what kind of tone that creates. Okay, anyways, this week, one last thing. I'm still marking your second paper. I'm a little behind on those, but I'll get those done this week, I promise. This week we're working on debunking conspiracy theories. So this is all meant to be used for like the solutions part of your paper. So we're moving into that idea. What do we do about conspiracy theories? How do we fight against them? How do we argue with people who believe in things like QAnon? How do we debunk these conspiracy theories, right? And that's what all the stuff is about this week, fact checking and debunking. So please read through those, and if you have any questions or concerns, you can email me or stop by my office hours. Thank you very much.